holes, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, a professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And in this hour, once again, we're going to throw the lines open because this hour is your hour. That's right. This is the time when you can get the telephones and have your voice heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. That's right. You can give us a call 24/7, anytime, day or night. You can call 866-323-2129. All we ask is that you leave your name, call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on national radio. And just remember, no question is, quote, too dumb or stupid to put on national radio. Sometimes the so-called silliest questions are the deepest, richest, most profound questions of all. For example, it was a 16-year-old kid who asked a simple question, can you outrace a light beam? Well, that 16-year-old kid happened to be Albert Einstein, and when he finally answered that question, he changed world history. The world as we know it, with atomic bombs, nuclear power plants, big bangs, black holes, the universe was never the same after that 16-year-old kid answered the silly question, can you outrace a light beam? And that's why you should call 866-323-2129, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on national radio. Hey, look, perhaps it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and you can't go to sleep, but you have this brainstorm of an idea, and you just have to talk to somebody, but there's no one to talk to. It's just you and the radio at 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, you can talk to me. You can give me a call at 866-323-2129. Or perhaps you're at the dinner table with your kids, and your kids ask you a homework problem that leaves you stumped. Well, why not put them on radio? Why not have them give me a call to ask that homework assignment on national radio? Once again, the number to call is 866-323-2129. And also, I'm always on touring. I was just in Los Angeles, I was in Texas, and perhaps I'll be in a city next to you autographing a copy of my latest book, The Future of the Mind. And after that, you can go to eBay and auction off my book for money. That's right, you can actually make money by getting an autographed copy of my book. The book is called The Future of the Mind, now in paperback form. Came out 2 years ago, hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's a book that talks about the latest developments concerning the brain, the mind, and computers. Did you know the United States Pentagon has dumped $150 million to connect the mind of injured GIs from Afghanistan and Iraq, hook them up to computers so they have the gift of life once again? And that the Pentagon has authorized a $50 million contract to go to the development of a memory chip. Think about this, a memory chip to help our GIs who may have memory impairment because of going to Iraq or Afghanistan. These are just some of the hundreds of incredible discoveries being made about the mind because of physics. Physics allows us to probe right into the thinking brain. We shoot radio into the living brain. We listen for echoes in the form of MRI scans. And bingo, we can actually see thoughts ricocheting inside the living brain. Or Freudian psychology. Maybe you learned it in high school or college. People thought, hey, come on, give me a break. No one can prove or disprove Freudian psychology. All this mumbo-jumbo about ego, id, libido, parts of the brain. Well, we can actually now do that. We can actually see the ego at work. We can actually see the superego at work. We can actually show that, well, yes, much of Freudian psychology is fake, but some of it is profoundly correct. The unconscious mind, yes, we can see it in action now. And the libido, the id, the superego, yes, we can see them in action as well. Anyway, the book is called The Future of the Mind, now in paperback form. Okay, well, once again, you can get on Science Fantastic by calling 866-323-2129. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the first listener phone call.
Yes, I'd like to know how fast the universe is expanding. Is it at the speed of light, or is it the speed of my old Chevy? And where is it expanding to? Is there an empty void that it is expanding into? Thank you.
Well, you ask a very interesting question, because if the universe is expanding, most people would say it's expanding into something. But, well, if the universe is everything there is, then how can it expand into anything else? Because the universe is everything there is. Well, there's several ways you can look at it. If you look at the universe as a balloon, and we astronomers and physicists always take the image of a balloon, and you expand the balloon by blowing it up, that's the expanding universe. However, what is the balloon expanding into? If the surface of the balloon is the universe, and that's everything there is, then the balloon is obviously expanding into another dimension, the third dimension of a balloon. Well, we think that our universe is three-dimensional. Length, width, and height typify every point of our universe, but it is expanding into another dimension, into hyperspace. In fact, in string theory, which is what I do for a living, we can actually calculate the number of these dimensions, and it's 11. So our universe is basically a bubble floating in a much larger universe. So we have the Big Bang Theory, given to us by Albert Einstein. And the Big Bang Theory says that, yes, there was a cosmic explosion that created the universe, and we can calculate the velocity of the explosion. In fact, the velocity of the explosion was faster than the speed of light. Now, you may say to yourself, well, doesn't that violate Einstein's own theory? No, because you see, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. Nothing meaning the vacuum, emptiness. Emptiness, according to Einstein, is a thing. You can bend it, twist it. That's the basis of Einstein's general theory of relativity. And so even nothingness can expand. But because it is nothingness and not matter, you can stretch space and time faster than the speed of light. So that's how we get around this rather strange paradox that the universe itself exceeded the speed of light when it first expanded. Now it's expanding much slower than that. But in the future, we think it may start to accelerate again. The latest results seem to indicate that the universe was born in a tremendous shock wave, slowed down, and then is beginning to speed up again. In fact, the Nobel Prize in Physics was given to 3 astronomers several years ago for showing experimentally that, yes, the universe is not just expanding slowly, it's actually accelerating, meaning that it is accelerating out of control, meaning that perhaps billions of years from now, it may get awfully cold because the stars will blink out, the universe will be huge by that point, and perhaps life as we know it will not survive. So the question is, can life survive if the universe itself dies? Most people would say no. We're all going to freeze to death like an ancient Norse myth. If you look at the work of Wagner and the Twilight of the Gods basically froze to death. Is that our future billions of years from now? Well, there is an escape clause. And the escape clause is perhaps when it gets really cold in the far future, perhaps we'll build a life raft, a wormhole, a dimensional portal, a gateway, and perhaps leave our universe. This is all speculation, however, but it leaves us to think that perhaps one day, if the universe expands too much, perhaps we should leave the universe. Find out more by getting a copy of my books, Hyperspace and Parallel Worlds. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
Hi, my name is Greg Hansen. I'm in Minnesota, 100.3. Not sure what the call sign is. I was wondering, what would you think the viability of using Olympus Mons as a base on Mars? Advantages being the lack of dust storms, availability of potential caverns, and, of course, much closer to orbit. Thank you.
Well, you ask a question that is actually being asked by astronomers consulting with NASA. NASA has announced that by 2030, at the earliest, 2030, we hope to send astronauts to the red planet. And already we're testing the booster rocket for this. We have a space capsule called Orion, which we're going to put on top of the space capsule. And we're going to begin to do flight testing of it in the next few years. And perhaps we're going to send it to an asteroid as a test in order to test that this booster rocket is fit to go all the way to the red planet. And recently we had an astronaut on Science Fantastic, Mr. Tom Jones, saying that perhaps once we get to Mars, instead of building a station like Matt Damon did in the movie The Martian, a Hollywood movie, perhaps instead of that, we should go underground, dig a cave, because of the fact that there's radiation, dust storms, micrometeorites. Mars is not a nice place to visit unless you have shielding to protect you against harmful rays from the sun and cosmic rays. Now, what you're saying is something a bit different. Instead of going underground to build caves and caverns to withstand the solar storms and dust storms racking the surface of the red planet, why not go to the top of a volcano? Mount Olympus, otherwise known as Olympus Mons. Olympus Mons is so big, it would extend from New York City to Canada if it were to be placed in the United States of America. It is the biggest volcano on 4 planets, as far as we can tell. The biggest volcano if you consider Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. And it is one of the highest points on Mars. And so what you say is, why not have a space station on Mount Olympus, Olympus Mons? Well, also there are caverns there. Caverns probably caused by lava tubes. Whenever you have a volcano, there are tubes, rivers of lava that melt into the soil. And these lava tubes eventually cool down and solidify. And some people have thought that maybe one day on the moon, we could have our astronauts live in lava tubes, because the moon also has high radiation fields. The moon also has micrometeorites, lack of oxygen, and is a pretty hostile environment for astronauts. Well, yeah, I think it's an idea. However, I think it's not practical for a few reasons. First of all, this is the top of a volcano. It is a huge, gigantic volcano, and to land on it would be quite difficult because you want to land on something that's very, very flat. In fact, if you've seen the places where the rovers have landed, you realize that they're quite ordinary and boring. Why? Because we want boring places to land on. We don't want to land on interesting places because the rover could turn over, it could collapse, it could fail. And if you're on the top of a volcano and you slip, oops, you're going to fall all the way down the side of one of the largest volcanoes on 4 planets. So it is an interesting idea, but it's an idea that I don't think is practical. However, the practical idea is to find a cavern, perhaps a lava tube left over from an ancient volcano, but a volcano that left not much of a crater. You want a very boring terrain. You don't want your rover to tip over. You don't want your rover to encounter all sorts of jagged rocks. You want it to be as boring as possible so that it would survive the landing and provide a place for astronauts of the future. Okay, well, let's take a short commercial break. Once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call at 866-323-2129, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on national radio. That's right. Write the number down. 866-323-2129 is the number to call.
information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Hi, this is DV Kidd. My new book, Taking Politics Out of Solutions, is now available. Why is it nothing changes no matter who you vote for? My book covers the most critical issues eating this country alive, as well as the solutions that are already there that Congress and the agenda-driven media don't want you to know. From the disaster of our economy, why we will never have economic freedom until the Fed is abolished, trade, the meltdown underway called Obamacare, the truth about Social Security and Medicare, and the fraudulent ratification of the 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, a very huge issue that affects every American. The answers and solutions are in my book, All Americans Need to Read, because the worst is coming at us like a freight train. To order, go to www.newswithviews.com.
You wouldn't dare build a house without a blueprint, and neither should you invest without a plan. Hi, Sam Sorbo here. My good friends at Landmark Capital specialize in tailor-made portfolios called Your Financial Blueprint. Let Landmark Capital show you how to control your retirement and safeguard your money from government seizure, protect it from an upcoming recession, and maximize your financial growth in case of inflation. Landmark Capital can show you how to put physical metals, gold and silver, into your IRA or 401k and take physical possession today. Your 401k IRA is a ticking time bomb. The government's racked up our debt to $18 trillion, and there's currently $18.2 trillion in retirement. 12 different countries have already seized their citizens' assets like bank and retirement accounts, and it can happen here any day now, according to the Federal Reserve. Get the facts. Call 855-747-5947, 855-747-5947, or find them at landmarkgold.com. Call 855-747-5947 or visit landmarkgold.com.
Hi, folks. GetTheTea.com is the place where the popular Life Change tea calls home. But did you know Get the Tea is also where you can purchase GMO-free organic supplements? You can read about their potent power at GetTheTea.com. Also, they just added a YouTube channel called Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. Education about our health can be a life change. Maybe that's why our famous tea is called Life Change Tea. Learn about the trees for life. Our supplements have no fillers, no wheat, no rice, no garbage. And our tea is wow to the body. Make a conscious health change. Educate yourself on the most powerful essence of life, which is your health. You want more? Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Or visit our YouTube channel at Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. And don't forget our fabulous mild detox tea at getthetea.com.
This is Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. It's open mic in this hour. That's right, you can get on national radio. You can have your thoughts heard around the country by giving us a call. The number to call is 866-323-2129. And once again, all we ask of you is that you add your name, the call letters of the radio station you're listening to, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps your thoughts will be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Okay, well, let's move on to the next listener phone call.
This is Jeff calling. I got something to tell you about a meteorite in the planet. The planet actually is created with an atmosphere and orbital body. And meteorites out there don't have any. Of course, the sun has one too, but it's actually applied by the boy and girl stuff that comes from space themselves to actually compress space to put that on there. And of course, one other thing would be the moon would be about as stupid as a meteorite. It really has been factored by human beings before. That's why it's an orbit around the planet. You should think about it as a spaceship. It's a little bit smarter than a dumb meteorite. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me try to at least address some of the terminology that you've mentioned in your question. You mentioned quite a few words, so let's try to define them because I'm sure a lot of people get these words confused. First of all, what is a meteor? Meteor is actually the streak of light caused by some kind of rock that is hitting the atmosphere of the Earth. And the streak of light only lasts for just a few seconds, and then it disappears. And if you're on a camping trip or you live out there in the countryside and you look up, every 5 minutes or so, depending upon where you're looking, you'll see this streak of light go right across the entire night sky. It is a rock, perhaps as small as a pebble, perhaps as small as a desk, a rock that is burning up, creating this streak of light. Now, once that streak of light hits the Earth, then it's called a meteorite. So a meteorite is the actual rock that hits the Earth. So once again, the meteor, believe it or not, is just a streak of light racing across the night sky. And the meteorite is the actual rock once it hits the Earth. And then what is the difference between that and a comet and a planet? Well, first of all, comets are very different. They linger in the night sky for weeks, months, freaking out people. The ancients thought that comets signaled the death of the king. The most famous example of this was in 1066, the most famous year in all of British history, when William of Normandy conquers England. Well, just before the Battle of Hastings, there was a comet that sailed over the battlefield, freaked out the troops of King Harold, paving the way for the victory of William the Conqueror, who created the modern dynasty of England. Well, it turns out that comet was Halley's Comet. Comets we now know are not just pieces of rock. They're gigantic icebergs, dirty snowballs in outer space, mainly made out of ice and some rock. And they can linger in the night sky because they don't vaporize when they hit the atmosphere. They're well outside the atmosphere of the planet Earth. And the tails of these comets can be hundreds of millions of miles long. So we're talking about something quite different from a meteor. A meteor, once again, is usually caused by a small little rock that goes racing through the atmosphere. Comets are caused by gigantic icebergs way outside the atmosphere of the Earth. And then, next, what is an asteroid? Well, an asteroid is a failed planet that orbits the sun mostly between Mars and Jupiter. So we think that when the solar system originally formed, there was one planet that either broke apart or never quite made it. It was a failed planet. It causes debris between Mars and Jupiter. And some of these pieces of rock hits the atmosphere and they become meteors. Okay, well, let's take a short commercial break. And once again, afterwards, we're going to continue with your phone calls. Give us a call at 866-323-2129 and share your thoughts on National Radio. Because this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call, 866-323-2129 is the number to call.
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Well, I've wrestled with reality for 35 years, Doctor, and I'm happy to state I finally won out over it.
Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, you're listening to a program that is open to all of you out there. It's open mic on Science Fantastic. That's right. You can give us a call at 866-323-2129. Here's how it works. The number is a call number you can call 24/7, anytime, day or night. Leave your name, call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and you can also leave the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can be on national radio. Just record a comment or question, and perhaps your thoughts could be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So give us a call. And once again, you may also want to pick up my latest book, now in paperback form. It's called The Future of the Mind. When it came out in hardback 2 years ago, it hit number one on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's all about the incredible developments as we begin to unlock the secrets of the mind. Do you know that we can actually see dreams as they're formed in the living brain and begin to understand why people dream? And also, did you know that we understand why you have nightmares, why thoughts are disorganized, and why lucid dreamers can actually control their dreams? That's right. There are people who can actually control the direction of their dream. They're called lucid dreamers, and with MRI scans, we've now proven that they are awake while they dream. Amazing. This is something right out of science fiction. And did you know we can actually photograph those dreams? This was once considered preposterous, but now using modern physics and MRI scans at the University of California, Berkeley, we can begin the first steps toward actually photographing a dream. Incredible. Okay, once again, you're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. The number to call if you want to get on air is 866-323-2129. So let's move on and take the next listener phone call.
Dr. Michio Kaku, I first became aware of a young scientist breaking the nuclear fusion problem. He was an amateur rocketeer, got special permission to build a fusion rocket, and he shot it off from, I believe it was Andrews Air Force Base in 1971. He was told to shoot it over in the desert in Nevada. That would be Area 51, Groom Lake. He said, well, I can do that, but, you know, there's nothing over there but sand, and your plane will land up to the stomach on it. Anyway, on the plane that flew in from Washington or from Florida was a number of paperclip German scientists. Arthur von Braun had given him many awards in the past for winning rocket contest, and this was his ultimate rocket. When they got to Area 51, they found a runway, they collected the rocket, and they took him into a large hangar. Anyway, I was just trying to recall his name, but I'm sure if you go to Coast, you can probably find that. My name is Wayne. Thank you.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with this person. However, let me say that fusion is the power of the sun. Some of our best scientists have tried to harness the power of fusion on the Earth and have failed. And however, there is a device which on a miniature scale was successful in terms of fusing a tiny, tiny microscopic amounts of hydrogen. This is called the fusor. You can Google it, F-U-S-O-R. It was actually built by the man who invented television. That's right. There was a man who invented television, Philo Farnsworth. He was a physicist, and he actually had an idea for what is now called television by looking at the way in which a field was plowed by a farmer. The farmer would go back and forth, and he thought that an electron gun could also go back and forth, and create an image. Unfortunately, he did not have a team of lawyers, and like many of the early inventors of radio and television, like Tesla, many of his ideas were, well, quite frankly, stolen. And, of course, he didn't have a team of lawyers to protect his patents. So Philo Farnsworth goes down as one of the unsung heroes of the electric age, the man who invented television. Well, after he invented television, he got very discouraged. I mean, I would too if all my ideas were stolen by the big TV companies. And so he tried to create fusion. He created basically two spheres. He put an electric field between these two spheres. When electric charges went hurtling from one sphere to the other, it would then fuse some of the hydrogen atoms inside the chamber. Well, as you can see, this is not a practical design. You cannot extract net energy from it. However, he did demonstrate that you could actually create fusion in your living room. That's right. However, you cannot extract power from this device. In fact, high school kids have entered fusors in their science fair projects. So you can actually do a little bit of fusion in your living room but hey, it's not practical. Sorry about that. You cannot extract usable energy for it. Okay, well, once again, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Give us a call and have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Give us a call.
Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Spread the word. Now there is powerful nutritional support for migraine sufferers. It's estimated that 35 million people suffer with migraines. Are you or a family member one of them? Well, now there is MigRelief by Akeso Health Sciences. MigRelief is a safe and healthy, non-prescription dietary supplement recommended by neurologists, pharmacists, and pediatricians to address the nutritional deficiencies in both adults and children over 2 with migraines. Just take 2 capsules a day of MigRelief for 3 months and see the amazing difference it can make in your life, or get your money back. No questions asked. There's nothing to lose. Akeso Health Sciences MigRelief has been helping people just like you for 20 years. Try MigRelief and get your life back risk-free with just one call. Call 1-800-MIG-7354, 1-800-MIG-7354, or go to MIG911.com.
You wouldn't dare build a house without a blueprint, and neither should you invest without a plan. Hi, Sam Sorbo here. My good friends at Landmark Capital specialize in tailor-made portfolios called Your Financial Blueprint. Let Landmark Capital show you how to control your retirement and safeguard your money from government seizure, protect it from an upcoming recession, and maximize your financial growth in case of inflation. Landmark Capital can show you how to put physical metals, gold and silver, into your IRA or 401k and take physical possession today. Your 401k IRA is a ticking time bomb. The government's racked up our debt to $18 trillion, and there's currently $18.2 trillion in retirement. 12 different countries have already seized their citizens' assets like bank and retirement accounts, and it can happen here any day now, according to the Federal Reserve. Get the facts. Call 855-747-5947, 855-747-5947, or find them at landmarkgold.com. Call 855-747-5947 or visit landmarkgold.com.
Hello. My name is Roy Masters. I'm an English veteran who's been witness to history and proud to become an American citizen. Because in America, free thought was encouraged and being truthful mattered more than being nice. My America was truly politically incorrect in all the best ways, which is why we were blessed. But things have changed, and Americans don't think American anymore. Even though I still speak with an English accent, my heart thinks American. My voice speaks American. And that is freedom. Please join me on my daily radio show Advice Line, Monday through Friday, and I will help you to reclaim our country. Let me help you find the courage to think and speak American again. Please download my radio show app, available now at the Apple App Store and Android Google Play. Thank you.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
Talk Radio Network at talkradionetwork.com.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. The lines are open because it's open mic in this hour. So once again, we urge you to give us a call at 866-323-2129. The number is open 24/7, anytime, day or night. Just leave your name, call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and record a comment or a question about science, and perhaps you can get on national radio. So once again, the number to call is 866-323-2129. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
Hello, Dr. Kaku. This is Lynn Sun calling from Guam in the Marianas Islands. I was struck by your interview immediately after the meltdown of the Daiichi 1 in Fukushima, when you claimed that the only solution to ending the meltdown and containing the radiation was to have a complete coverage of the facility in Fukushima with cement, much as they did with the Chernobyl disaster, covering with cement. What are your feelings now about containing the leakage of the radiation in Fukushima? There has been no discussion worldwide, at least in the media, about how to deal with the containment of the radiation, which continues to leak into the Pacific. It affects us here on Guam, in the Pacific, and of course leaking throughout the Pacific into California, and we are very concerned. What do you think should be done? Thank you so much, Professor.
Well, you're absolutely right. The agony of having 3 simultaneous meltdowns in Fukushima 5 years ago, the agony is still with us. The government and the utility have admitted that they have made almost no progress in terms of dismantling the melted reactors. Well, let me take a short commercial break, and after the break, we'll give you a rundown as to what's happening or what's not happening at the Fukushima site 50 years after one of the greatest nuclear accidents in modern times. So give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129, and after the break, we'll talk about what is happening at one of the greatest nuclear disasters of all time in Japan. Give us a call. 866-323-2129 is the number to call.
This is Science Fantastic.
We have thrown everything except the kitchen sink at this reactor and it failed. The time has come to throw in the kitchen sink. And that is what I call the Chernobyl option. What Gorbachev did was he called out the Red Air Force, armed them with helicopters containing sand, boric acid, dolomite, and concrete, and sandbagged the Chernobyl reactor in 10 days. A raging nuclear fire, dumping 25% of its core right over the people of the Soviet Union, and he sandbagged it, buried it. Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, the lines are open because it's open mic on Science Fantastic. You can give us a call by calling 866-323-2129. Well, before the break, we had a call from Guam. A woman there was saying that, yes, I was on international television during the accident 5 years ago at Fukushima at the height of the disaster, when we now know that the government in Tokyo was contemplating evacuating the entire Tokyo area, which of course is physically impossible with 15 million people. But during those hours, those crucial hours, I came out and I recommended that we sandbag the reactor. We bury it in concrete just the way the Russians did it in 1986 with the Chernobyl disaster. The Soviets, realizing that the reactor's top had been blown off, realizing that radiation was just being lofted into the environment out of control, that there was a raging fire, that their own crewmen were basically dying of radioactive poisoning, they said sandbag it. How do they do it? They called the Red Air Force. They put lead underneath the airplanes so the pilots wouldn't get irradiated, and they dumped borated sand treated with boron. Boron absorbs neutrons. They sandbagged it by putting borated sand covering the entire reactor in cement. And then I said, at the height of the Fukushima disaster, let's do the same thing in Japan. Unfortunately, they didn't take my advice, though they heard about it. Japanese officials heard about the fact that a physicist, myself, was recommending that they sandbag the reactor. They said, well, it's not that bad. Now we know, of course, it was much worse than they previously said. And where are we now, 5 years from now? Have we dismantled the mess? Have we extracted the melted fuel? Are we beginning to repair the reactors? And the answer to all those is no. How much progress have we made in terms of dismantling the melted reactors? You'd be surprised. The answer is none. Zero. In fact, we can't even shut off the cooling water, which is dumping radioactive water into Tokyo Harbor. They've sent submarines trying to take photographs of the melted core, but have failed. We don't even know what the melted core looks like. Like at 3 Mile Island, for example, I once interviewed one of the leaders of the cleanup operation, and he admitted to me that the core, the nuclear core of the reactor, looked like a pile of granola. Take a bunch of granola from the supermarket, make a pile of it, and that's what the core looked like at 3 Mile Island. Well, we now know that the cores at Fukushima, 3 of them liquefied. We've never seen this before. 3 liquefied cores. But in what configuration did they re-solidify in? And the answer is we're clueless. It is so radioactive that they cannot send workers into the site other than just for a few minutes at a time. The submarines have been unsuccessful in terms of photographing the melted core, and they're still unsuccessful in terms of trying to rein in some of the radioactive cooling water that is still being let into Tokyo Harbor. This is unimaginable agony. And how long will it take to clean up the mess? About 40 years. 40 years. This is the estimate, the best estimate of the utility and the government itself. 40 years to clean up the mess. If they had taken my advice 5 years ago, we would have ended the crisis, just sandbagged the whole thing, entombed it in solid borated concrete. Unfortunately, they didn't take the advice, and so we're stuck. We're stuck now with 3 melted nuclear power plants for the next 40 years. In fact, the United States Pentagon got involved. They said, wouldn't this be a great showplace to exhibit our robots? Robots are getting more and more intelligent every year. So why not have a contest? Invite the world's best robot manufacturers to come and exhibit their robots to fulfill a challenge. The DARPA challenge was very simple. The robot would have to drive a car, get out of the car, sweep the floor of debris, and then turn a valve. Very rudimentary things that even children can do. Well, you can see the results of the DARPA challenge on Google. Simply Google it. DARPA is the branch of the government that actually invented the internet, invented GPS, and initiated the driverless car challenge. And now they want a robot. They challenged the world's engineers to create a robot that could perform the simplest task. And you know what happened? Almost all of them failed. Only one group, the group from South Korea, was able to carry out just the rudiments, just the basic rudiments of a cleanup operation. So no wonder we're in such a mess. Humans can only be in that lethal radioactive field for just a few minutes at a time. Robots are simply too stupid to begin the cleanup operation. And there we are 5 years later, stuck with 3 melted nuclear power plants, and we're clueless as to how to stop the agony. The latest development you probably read in the newspaper is that they're trying to build a refrigerator. They're trying to get refrigerator units to freeze the water around the reactor to create a wall of ice to try to confine the radioactive water so it doesn't go into Tokyo Harbor. What a mess. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Join us every week on Science Fantastic when we profile the mysteries and the cutting edge of science. And once again, you can always give us a call by calling 866-323-2129, and you can be on Science Fantastic. Once again, give us a call at 866-323-2129. Leave your name, call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from. Leave a comment or question, and perhaps you can get on national radio. And if your children have any comments or questions, why not put them on the line and have them heard on over 100 radio stations? Once again, this is Dr. Michio Kaku for Science Fantastic. Good day.
Black holes, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And in this hour, we're going to go to the very limits of the universe. We're going to be talking about parallel universes. We're going to be talking about starships. And we're going to be bringing on a theoretical physicist talking about the recent developments in science. Our special guest today for this hour is Professor Paul Davies, winner of the $1 million Templeton Prize. He's a professor of theoretical physics at Arizona State University, and he's also the director of the Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science at Arizona State, author of a number of great books, including How to Build a Time Machine, The Eerie Silence, Cosmic Jackpot, Why Our Universe is Just Right for Life. And we're going to be talking about some of the work that he's been doing on things like gravity waves, parallel universes. Did you know that we can now conceive of building devices in outer space, gravity wave detectors, that'll detect the instant of creation itself and maybe give us evidence that the baby universe is connected with an umbilical cord to a parent universe, which would explain the origin of the Big Bang itself. Think about that. Think about building a starship. We're going to talk today with Dr. Paul Davies about the first practical design for a starship that could actually be built in just a few decades to reach the nearby stars in 20 years' time. A workable starship. Not the size of the Enterprise. Of course, it has to be scaled down. It's the size of a postage stamp, driven by a bank of laser beams blasting it to 20% the speed of light. And then we're going to talk about the movies with Dr. Paul Davies. We're going to talk about the theory of everything, which won an Academy Award. Movies like Interstellar, talking about time travel and black holes. Movies like The Imitation Game, about the origin of artificial intelligence and the computer revolution. We're going to bring on Dr. Paul Davies of Arizona State University, a theoretical physicist, talking about time travel, space warps, higher dimensions, and building a starship. So stay tuned.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Hi, this is DV Kidd. My new book, Taking Politics Out of Solutions, is now available. Why is it nothing changes no matter who you vote for? My book covers the most critical issues eating this country alive, as well as the solutions that are already there that Congress and the agenda-driven media don't want you to know. From the disaster of our economy, why we will never have economic freedom until the Fed is abolished, trade, the meltdown underway called Obamacare, the truth about Social Security and Medicare, and the fraudulent ratification of the 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, a very huge issue that affects every American. The answers and solutions are in my book, All Americans Need to Read, because the worst is coming at us like a freight train. To order, go to www.newswithviews.com.
Spread the word. Now there is powerful nutritional support for migraine sufferers. It's estimated that 35 million people suffer with migraines. Are you or a family member one of them? Well, now there is MigRelief by Akeso Health Sciences. MigRelief is a safe and healthy, non-prescription dietary supplement recommended by neurologists, pharmacists, and pediatricians to address the nutritional deficiencies in both adults and children over 2 with migraines. Just take 2 capsules a day of MigRelief for 3 months and see the amazing difference it can make in your life, or get your money back. No questions asked. There's nothing to lose. Akeso Health Sciences MigRelief has been helping people just like you for 20 years. Try MigRelief and get your life back risk-free with just one call. Call 1-800-MIG-7354, 1-800-MIG-7354, or go to MIG911.com.
Having a place to go after school will make you a better student. Having an outlet to express yourself will make you a better artist. Having something to do together will make you a better family. At The Y, we're helping build better friends, listeners, writers, swimmers, scientists, and musicians, one chance at a time. Give the gift of opportunity. Donate to The Y at ymca.net/give. The Y, for a better us.
Hello, here I am, Roy Masters, 55 years on talk radio and still saving lives. Please continue helping the Foundation of Human Understanding by simply donating $19.95 per month. Paying it forward plan will continue saving lives into the years to come. I'm a pioneer in helping our troops to overcome the ravages of PTSD without drugs. Go to FHU.com and then click on the donation page. That's FHU.com.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
This is Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. In this hour, we're going to bring on one of the world's leading theoretical physicists talking about Einstein, talking about dark matter, gravity waves, talking about the movies. With us today is Professor Paul Davies. He's written a number of great books, about 25 of them, I think, by last count. He's written books like How to Build a Time Machine, The Eerie Silence, The Cosmic Jackpot, Why the Universe is Just Right for Life. He's a professor at Arizona State University in Tucson, and he's the director of the Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science. So, Paul, glad you could be on, once again, Science Fantastic.
Pleasure.
Okay. Well, the first question that we always ask our guests is, how did you, as a youth, first get interested in science?
Well, I grew up in London in the post-war years of great austerity, and in a single word, boredom. There was very little to do. We didn't have any money. The toys were scarce, didn't go on vacation. And so for me, science was a form of escapism. I realized that just by looking up at the sky, I could enter a wonderland that most people didn't notice. And I got interested in also atoms and things unseen, inner space as well as outer space. And all this before the age of 11. I like to tell journalists that my career in the direction of astrophysics and cosmology was propelled by none other than Margaret Thatcher, later the Prime Minister of the UK, who gave me a star atlas when I was 16. I still have it with her signature in it. And
that was a prize. She happened to be the Member of Parliament in the area where I went to high school. And so that's a nice little story. But already by that age, I was determined to make a career in theoretical physics. I should say, I was the only one in the family. My parents thought I was a bit of a crackpot, and my brother and sister did completely different things. I'm the only scientist in the family, and probably the only one ever likely to be.
I see. And what was it about theoretical physics that drew you into the subject? Was there a book, a concept, a role model? What was it that drew you in the direction of theoretical physics?
There was a role model, actually. It was Fred Hoyle, who was a famous and somewhat controversial British cosmologist and astronomer at Cambridge University, but he was also very well known for his science fiction. During my formative years, in my youth, he was responsible, for example, for a TV series, a drama called A for Andromeda, which was all about SETI, about the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, about a signal coming from the Andromeda galaxy with the recipe for building a living organism. All this stuff was really fascinating to me. But he wrote a particular book, I think it was called The Universe or Astronomy Now or something, I can't remember exactly what. And I read that in my mid-teens. And I thought, well, he was somebody who could write engagingly, but also address really fundamental questions. And I've always been interested in the deep issues of existence, not so much the technicalities here and there, although you have to deal with those if you're a professional scientist. But I've always been compelled by asking the great questions like, how did the universe come to exist, and are we alone, and how will it all end? What am I doing here? Those have been the things that fascinated me. So I was naturally drawn to big question subject areas like cosmology.
And now that you mention it, when I was a child, I read I guess it was called The Black Cloud by Fred Hoyle, and it was an intelligent cloud, a gigantic cloud in outer space that was intelligent, and it had a mission to find out the origin of the universe. But I read at the end of the book, and of course, it doesn't give the answer.
Right.
Well, what did happen at the beginning of the universe, right?
Well, you see, Fred Hoyle was famous for championing the alternative to the Big Bang theory. In fact, he was the one who coined the term Big Bang in the early 50s as a term of derision for people who thought the universe popped up all in one go. He wanted the universe to have existed forever and ever, and as it expands, for matter to be continually created instead of in one great bang as time goes along. Now, this was very popular in the 50s and 60s, but by the end of the 60s, it had fallen out of favor, largely because of the discovery of the heat radiation from the Big Bang, the fading afterglow of that first initial burst. And that radiation would be very hard to explain if you suppose that the universe had always existed in more or less its present form.
Yeah, but still, I think Fred Hoyle should have won the Nobel Prize for nucleosynthesis, but according to legend, one of the reasons why he did not get the Nobel Prize was because he criticized the Nobel Prize committee for bypassing a woman, Jocelyn Bell. And,
right. Now, Fred was a very controversial figure, both within Cambridge University, where he had a number of detractors, a number of supporters, but nationally and internationally. So he would champion various causes, some of them worthy, some of them, frankly, off the wall. And so at the time when the Nobel Prize was awarded to his collaborators for work on nucleosynthesis, that is how the chemical elements get cooked inside stars, that's where they come from. He worked out a lot of the details of that in the late 40s and early 50s. At the time that Nobel Prize was awarded, Fred was saying that many of the diseases that we're familiar with, like influenza, for example, the viruses for those are coming from space, not from other species or other individuals, but coming down from the sky, and that was considered beyond the pale. So Fred was never afraid of championing causes that were against the mainstream, swimming against the tide, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of people don't realize he didn't retire. He actually resigned his chair at Cambridge University in 1972. I was there at the time, and he sort of stormed off and lived life as a semi-recluse in the northwest of England in the mountains.
Is that right? I didn't know that part of the story. Okay, well, let's just jump right into some of the big stories of the past few months. Gravity waves. That hit the news a while ago. Einstein predicted them to exist in 1916, and it took 100 years for physics to finally catch up with Einstein. So tell us a little bit about gravity waves. Why the big fuss about them?
A very fitting story, I think, that pretty much exactly the centenary of Einstein's prediction of gravity waves, they were finally detected. Now, this is a subject dear to my heart. I first learned about it in those early days in Fred Hoyle's Institute in Cambridge in the early 70s, when a guy called Joe Weber, who in those days worked at the University of Maryland, claimed to have detected these gravity waves using a big cylinder of metal that was shaking and vibrating in an otherwise unaccountable manner. And for a while it looked like this discovery had already happened, but then the weight of evidence seemed to be against that. That looked to be like a false alarm. And a whole new generation of gravitational wave detectors was built based on using laser beams rather than metal bars. But it's the same general principle. Our listeners are probably thinking, well, what the hell is a gravity wave? And the answer is, I think everyone's familiar with radio waves. They better be, because that's how they're hearing us. Radio waves are electromagnetic waves, which means that they are electricity and magnetism rippling out across space. The same thing can happen with gravitation, whereas for electromagnetic waves you have electric currents wiggling up and down, say, in an antenna. All you need to make gravitational waves are masses wiggling up and down. So any movement of a mass will do. But because gravitation is such a feeble force, you need stupendous quantities of mass moving around in order to generate a detectable gravitational wave. So you have to think astronomy, say black holes. Collisions of black holes is ideal, collisions of neutron stars. All these things were identified decades ago as likely sources of these gravity waves. And for, 30 or 40 years, physicists have been searching for them using these laser-based systems. And finally, with a bit of an upgrade a year ago, one of these detectors called LIGO, Laser Interferometer Gravitational Observatory, LIGO, Advanced LIGO, upgraded LIGO, finally announced that it had detected the merger of two black holes in a galaxy far, far away a long, long time ago. Gravitational waves, like electromagnetic waves, travel at the speed of light. And so they ripple out across space at that speed. And it's a huge triumph, not just for Einstein's theory, but because it opens up a new window on the universe.
Now, some people say that the next generation of these detectors will be in outer space, like LISA, Laser Interferometry Space Antenna. The European Union is also thinking of having space-based gravity wave detectors capable of detecting radiation from the instant of creation itself. Some people think that maybe we can run the videotape backwards and get radiation from before the Big Bang, or at least check some of the theories of before the Big Bang, and that would give us the first clue as to what happened before Genesis. So what are your thoughts about the next generation of gravity wave detectors, which might just be powerful enough to pick up radiation from the instant of the Big Bang, and therefore give us evidence as to what happened before the Big Bang? What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is that gravitational waves are much better for that purpose than electromagnetic waves because they go through everything. The problem, if you try to look back at the Big Bang with electromagnetic waves like heat and light, is you get blocked off at about 380,000 years after the Big Bang. You can't see back before that because it's like a luminous cloud. For the same reason you can't see into the middle of the sun. You just see the surface of the sun. But gravitational waves could come through all that luminous fog, and so, in principle, we can detect gravitational waves from the very earliest moments of the universe because, as I explained, they're produced just by large amounts of matter sloshing around, and there was plenty of that going on in the early rumble of the Big Bang. And about a year ago, there was actually another false alarm, an announcement that evidence for such gravitational waves had been discovered in an experiment done at the South Pole that looked at the twisting of light coming from the Big Bang under the influence of what was supposed to be gravitational waves from the earliest moment. That's gone away, but in principle we could detect such things. It's going to be difficult. It will need probably space-based detectors, and all this is going to be very expensive, but there's no particular reason we can't peer right back. And then you raise this fascinating issue about, everyone wants to know, well, what happened before the Big Bang? Was it the origin of time? Was there nothing before the Big Bang? Or is the Big Bang simply the beginning of our universe embedded in some much bigger system, sometimes called the multiverse? And if so, what happened before the Big Bang? And could any trace of physical processes that characterize that prior epoch have survived the Big Bang and propagate to us today? And that very much depends on whose theory you like, and there's flavor of the month theories, and no doubt in another 10 years there'll be different theories around. But at the end of the day, you've got to do the experiments to put a constraint on the theorist's imagination.
Now, some people say that the presence of alternate universes, parallel universes, higher dimensions can never be tested because we live in our universe, and how do you go outside the universe? But if it's possible to pick up gravity waves from the instant of creation and then perhaps run the videotape a little bit backwards before the instant of creation, isn't it therefore a testable idea? A testable idea that some of these theories like inflation or string theory, it's a testable concept that we can actually pick up what the universe might have looked at like before creation. It's testable. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's weakly testable. So I think everyone's fascinated by the notion that there could be like other universes, either existing before our own or in parallel with our own, sort of out there, beyond the edges of our universe and inaccessible, or even in quantum physics, which is very weird, the possibility of parallel universes that are actually, in some sense, very close to us, but inaccessible because of the way the rules of quantum mechanics work. And then the question is, how can we ever test the notion of something that almost by definition is inaccessible to us? And there are some weak tests that one can consider. Now, you've been talking about directly testing, that is, say, picking up gravitational waves that might emanate from some epoch before the Big Bang, and that would be very nice if you could do that. But even if that is not possible, it may be possible to somehow get evidence that there are other realities, other worlds, just from statistical means. And you mentioned a book of mine, which confusingly had two titles. It was called Cosmic Jackpot, and then in the paperback edition, The Goldilocks Enigma. But it's basically about why is the universe just right for life. And the way that works is that I think most scientists are aware of the fact that the laws that govern our universe can't be changed by very much, and there still be life here and observers like us to reflect on the meaning of it all. That there are certain parameters in basic physics which need to be very close to their actual values in order for life to emerge. So we do seem to live in a curiously bio-friendly universe. It looks almost like it's cooked up to bring forth life. And people want to know what's the explanation for that. And one possibility is that there's a vast multiplicity of universes with different laws, different values for these things.
Okay, Paul, we're going to have to take a short commercial break, but after the break, we're going to continue our discussion of parallel universes and also starships. Is it possible that one day we can send microchips to the distant stars? Once again, you're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Our special guest today is renowned physicist, Professor Paul Davies of Arizona State University. So stay tuned.
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Michio Kaku. In this hour, we're very delighted to have with us Professor Paul Davies of Arizona State University. He's the author of a number of great books in theoretical physics, including How to Build a Time Machine, The Eerie Silence, Cosmic Jackpot, Why the Universe is Just Right for Life. And he's the winner of the $1 Million Templeton Prize. And he's also the director of the Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science at Arizona State University. Well, Paul, when we last left off, we were talking about parallel universes, a subject that is dear to the hearts of science fiction writers, but most scientists would say, bah, humbug. How can you possibly measure something outside the universe, which by definition is outside our testable means? One possibility is to look for evidence of radiation, gravity waves, emitted at the instant of the Big Bang, but you also mentioned some other indirect ways that we might test this idea of a multiverse of universes. So could you elaborate now?
Yes, so in a favorite version of this other universes theory, the other worlds out there beyond the edges of our universe have different laws and different values for various fundamental constants. So, for example, if you don't like the mass of the electron, well, you go far enough over there, you'll get to a universe that has heavier electrons. Or if you're unhappy about the strength of the weak nuclear force, well, go in the other direction, you might find a universe that's got a weaker weak nuclear force, and so on. And the idea is that only in a tiny fraction of those would all those numbers come out just right for life, Goldilocks-like. And so as we live in such a universe, is that the best explanation? Well, you can make a statistical prediction. You can say that if we imagine there's this very large assembly of universes and just randomly distributed laws and numbers like that, then there are certain things that we should find when we investigate more closely. That is, when we measure the values of various constants that appear in our universe, like the strength of the dark energy would be a very good one. This is the energy that is causing the universe to expand faster and faster and faster. It's got a very small value compared to what theory might predict. And one possible explanation for that is that if it were any larger, there could be no living thinking beings like us to worry about it. So this is like a statistical fluctuation. But from the theory of statistics, we know that fluctuations have certain properties. And so we could make predictions about, as we measure the value of this dark energy more precisely, what we should find in relation to the other things we know about the universe. So this is not a very strong, it's a rather indirect way of testing for the existence of other universes, but it is meaningful. Statistical tests are meaningful.
Okay, well, moving right along, let's talk about another headline that was recently made by Stephen Hawking and some billionaires who are backing the idea of building a starship. Not like the Enterprise, a gigantic device that would cost trillions of dollars, but parachute-sized starships the size of a chip, a computer chip that you would send by laser beams to Alpha Centauri. So I understand that you were also part of this. So tell us a little bit about the idea of building a starship with a parachute.
Right. The person who is financing this, Yuri Milner, is one of the great scientific philanthropists of our age. He's put immense sums of money into a number of projects, including SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. But I was with him and a group of other people about 2 or 3 weeks ago in California to talk about his latest brainchild, which is to, as you said, send a very small payload to the stars using laser beams to propel them. And so this is how this works. When we normally think of traveling to the stars, we do think of some sort of gigantic spaceship, but you just want to send a probe there. And because miniaturization has progressed in leaps and bounds, as we know from Earth-based technology, it's possible to imagine a space probe that weighs no more than 1 gram, that if you could accelerate it to 20% of the speed of light, would reach the nearest star, Alpha Centauri, in about 20 years. And when it gets there, the idea is that even such a small size, it could gather important data, maybe even imaging, and beam that back to Earth. Now, you wouldn't want to base everything just on one single little chip. So the idea would be to send a swarm of them, and maybe only a handful would get through. But that's enough to send back really important data within a person's lifetime, instead of the usual scenario you've got to wait thousands of years before anybody gets there. The biggest challenge here is how do you accelerate even a 1 gram payload to the speed of light? And the method that they seem to have homed in on is using ground-based lasers, very powerful. Most people don't think that light exerts a pressure, but it does. If you shine a light, say on your hand, you don't feel your hand being pushed away. But a very good illustration of the pressure of light is the tail of a comet. So when you look at
Paul, we're going to have to take yet another short commercial break, but after the break, we're going to continue a discussion of starships. Is it possible to send a starship the size of a postage stamp to the stars? Once again, you're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. And once again, our special guest today is Professor Paul Davies of Arizona State University, talking about starships and parallel universes. So stay tuned.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Do you or a loved one suffer migraine headaches? Listen to what scientist Kurt Hendricks has to say.
If you are one of the millions of people who get migraines, you need to know about MiGrelief. Hi, I'm Kurt Hendricks, the scientist who created MiGrelief, the patented dietary supplement that addresses nutritional deficiencies in adults and children with migraines. Thousands of physicians and pharmacists recommend MiGrelief.
Call 800-MIG-7354 or visit MIG911.com.
Having a place to go after school will make you a better student. Having an outlet to express yourself will make you a better artist. Having something to do together will make you a better family. At The Y, we're helping build better friends, listeners, writers, swimmers, scientists, and musicians, one chance at a time. Give the gift of opportunity. Donate to The Y at ymca.net/give. The Y, for a better us.
Hi folks, GetTheTea.com is the place where the popular Life Change Tea calls home. But did you know Get the Tea is also where you can purchase GMO-free organic supplements? You can read about their potent power at GetTheTea.com. Also, they just added a YouTube channel called Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. Education about our health can be a life change. Maybe that's why our famous tea is called Life Change Tea. Learn about the trees for life. Our supplements have no fillers, no wheat, no rice, no garbage. And our tea is wow to the body. Make a conscious health change. Educate yourself on the most powerful essence of life, which is your health. You want more? Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Or visit our YouTube channel at Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. And don't forget our fabulous mild detox tea at getthetea.com.
Hello, I'm Roy Masters. In spite of the fact I dislike asking for financial support for my listeners, I realize the consequence of failing to do so. I will have denied my listeners the second chance to express the grace of paying forward the benefits they receive through my radio program and the Foundation of Human Understanding, the organization I founded over 50 years ago. Your support will make a vital difference with the pledge as little as 63 cents a day throughout this year. Consider a donation of $19.95 per month or whatever you can afford and help me help others, especially our returning heroes. So for the sake of the military and millions of broken lives, if you haven't done so already, pay it forward, the benefits which you've received throughout the years from one crying in the wilderness. Go to FHU.com/donate, FHU.com/donate. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Our special guest today is Professor Paul Davies, theoretical physicist at Arizona State University, winner of the $1 Million Templeton Prize, author of a number of great books, including The Eerie Silence and Cosmic Jackpot, Why Our Universe is Just Right for Life. Well, Paul, when we last left off, we were talking about a proposal to build a starship, a real starship, not the size of the Enterprise, but the size of a postage stamp that is propelled by laser beams. I went through the math, and it looks as if it's possible, but you have to have 100 gigawatts of power. That's 100 nuclear power plants generating energy to propel this object to the stars. So the question is this practical?
Well, I think it's just about practical. The issue, I think, is not so much with the energy, because you don't want continuous output of that sort of huge amount. What you want to do is to accumulate energy from a power plant and then store it and release it in one great pulse, or series of pulses that might last 20 seconds or a minute or something. So there's a huge acceleration because you're getting up to 20% of the speed of light in that period of time. But it's been shown that the sort of electronic components that are going to go into this thing can withstand those sorts of accelerations. So that isn't an issue. I think the biggest technical challenge is focusing the laser beam and keeping it on target. So what you're going to have in order for the very feeble effect of light pressure to exert the necessary acceleration is you have to have a collecting area like a sail, a reflecting sail or a parachute, and you've got to hit that with a ground-based laser beam when this object is out in space. So you take all your swarm of little space probes with their parachute-like appendages and release them in space and then zap them one by one with this powerful ground-based laser. So focusing that laser through the atmosphere and on that tiny little pinpoint and then not vaporizing the payload you're trying to accelerate, all of that represents a formidable challenge. And so this isn't something that's going to be done next year.
Okay. Well, we have to take yet another short commercial break. But after the break, let's talk about the movies. There are so many movies that incorporate physics and mathematics, like The Martian, Imitation Game, The Theory of Everything, Interstellar. So let's take a short commercial break. And after the break, let's talk about going to the movies. And what does a theoretical physicist think when they watch Hollywood distort or represent modern physics? Once again, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So give us a call.
You're listening to Science Fantastic. You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, we have with us on the line Professor Paul Davies, author of a number of great books in physics and cosmology, including How to Build a Time Machine, The Eerie Silence, and Cosmic Jackpot, Why Our Universe is Just Right for Life. He's a professor of theoretical physics at Arizona State University and director of the Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science and winner of the $1 Million Templeton Prize. Well, Paul, let's now go to the movies. Most of the time, we physicists have to cringe watching how science is distorted by the media. But let's talk about some of the positive examples. For example, The Imitation Game, about the life of Alan Turing, one of the founders of the modern computer and artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts about The Imitation Game?
First of all, you're completely right that we sit and cringe for most of the movies, but The Imitation Game, I thought, was done very well. there was a little bit of departure, I think, from historical reality, not in the science or the mathematics, but just in the personalities. When the big breakthrough in decoding the German Enigma code during World War II came in a flash of inspiration in a pub near to Bletchley Park, which is where Turing and the other scientists were beavering away. I feel a strong affinity to this particular movie because my brother, who worked for English Heritage for many years, was instrumental in providing a grant for Bletchley Park to be restored and turned into a museum. And so he and I and other members of our family did a VIP tour there a few years ago.
Is that
and
right?
The curator rolled out the red carpet and let us play with a few Enigma machines and inspect some of the reconstructed equipment. And we got the inside story on Alan Turing and his unusual habits of work. And I thought that the movie captured really rather well the combination of genius and eccentricity that Turing represented, and also the monumental and heroic effort, all going on in secret, of cracking this Enigma code and other codes as well, and kept secret for the duration of the war, and in fact for many years afterwards. It was only dimly recognized what a significant contribution this had made. Some people think it shortened the period of the war by up to 2 years because of being able to read basically all the German information from their high command.
And there's a rumor that maybe you can clarify. Alan Turing committed suicide because he was persecuted by the British government for being gay, even though he was part and parcel of winning the war effort by cracking the German code. And he dipped an apple in cyanide. Some people think, as a rumor, that Apple computers, the symbol of Apple, is an apple with a bite taken out in honor of Alan Turing. But
yes,
what are your thoughts?
Well, I believe that all along. It just seemed such a nice story, but I decided to check on it a year or so ago, and found that this was probably not the correct explanation. It had more to do with the fruit growing in the Silicon Valley area than with Alan Turing. But one never really knows with these icons what the true provenance is.
Okay. Now, also, the movie Theory of Everything. I saw the movie, won an Oscar. However, I was a little bit disappointed that it didn't talk too much about the theory of everything. It talked more about the physical affliction of Stephen Hawking. But what are your thoughts about the movie The Theory of Everything?
Again, you picked a movie with which I have a strong affinity because I was there through most of the episodes being portrayed in that movie. For example, I went to Cambridge in 1970, and Stephen was just the lad in the wheelchair a few offices along. I knew him very well. I have this distinctive memory of the British tea break is such an important part of life in Britain generally, but academic life in particular. You take a break at a particular fixed time, like, say, 4 in the afternoon, and everybody congregates in one area, and you have some tea and talk, and that's the time when you really interact. And my memory of tea break at the Institute of Theoretical Astronomy, where Stephen and I were young postdocs, was of him propelling his wheelchair backwards. In those days, he could do it himself, down the corridor, and I'd think, it must be tea time. So I loved all those early scenes of Cambridge because it was very true. I also liked the characterization of most of the people. I didn't find the Roger Penrose character very convincing, but Dennis Sciama, who was Stephen's PhD thesis advisor, I knew him very well, and the actor portrays Dennis just like the real Dennis. So it was a trip down memory lane for me. I loved the film.
Mm-hmm. And what about the movie Interstellar? That was a movie that actually asked physicists like Kip Thorne of Caltech to be an advisor to do some of the computer simulations of going through a black hole and a wormhole. So what are your thoughts about the movie Interstellar?
Well, Interstellar was, of course, a very different sort of movie. So that was really well into the realms of science fiction. And although It's based on some things that we know and love, like black holes and then much more conjectural wormholes, and the notion of time warps and time distortion, and all of this came into the movie in an integral way in the story. It didn't really sort of add up in terms of what the physics tells us and in terms of the logical consistency. There's always a problem about any sort of causal loops or time loops, that you have to get it right. And it's very rare in any sort of movie involving weird effects in time that somehow the consistency of the physics and the narrative that the director wants to portray sit together nicely. So I thought it was a bit of a fudge. But, you know, the special effects were good, and I got carried along in the story. It's not difficult for me to get caught up in a story. I'm a rather emotional person. I often end up crying in movies, even in happy ones.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. But once again, our special guest today has been Professor Paul Davies. So, Paul, thank you so much for being on Science Fantastic.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Once again, join us every week when we discuss the cutting edge of science.
Black holes, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries that are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And once again, in this hour, we're going to throw the lines open because this hour is your hour. This is the time when you can get to the phones and give us a call and have your thoughts heard on national radio. That's right. Give us a call at 866-323-2129. Once again, write this number down, 866-323-2129. And you'll get a recording. Leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from. And leave a message, leave a comment or a question, and perhaps you can get on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. And just remember, no question is, quote, too dumb or too stupid to put on national radio. Chances are, if you have that same question, chances are there are hundreds of other people that also have that same identical question. And so share your thoughts on Science Fantastic. And remember, maybe it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you just can't get to sleep, but something's bothering you. Something's bothering you about a story you heard in the newspapers or radio stations or read in the papers, a story about science, about our world, and there's no one to talk to at 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, you can talk to me. That number is live 24/7, anytime, day or night. You can give us a call. 4 o'clock in the morning, you can give us a call 24/7. And once again, the number to call is 866-323-2129. Or maybe you're having dinner with the kids, and all of a sudden the kids ask you a homework question that leaves you stumped. What are you going to do? Well, why don't you put your kids on radio? Why don't you have them ask me that science question? And perhaps their voice could be heard on over 100 radio stations across the U.S. that carry Science Fantastic. And so once again, the number to call is 866-323-2129. 323-2129. And just remember that I'm always on tour. I was just speaking in Los Angeles last month. I just got back from speaking in Europe. And maybe I'll be signing your copy of my latest book, The Future of the Mind, now in paperback form. The book came out 2 years ago in hardcover, and it hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And the book is now available in paperback form. And go to my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org, and find out whether or not I'll be in your city signing your copy of The Future of the Mind. And then after that, you can go to eBay and auction it off for money. That's right, you can actually make some money after listening to today's program, because autographed books are actually worth more than unautographed books. And once again, the book is called The Future of the Mind. Did you know that the United States Pentagon has spent over $150 million trying to hook up the brain to a computer to give the gift of life once again to our wounded warriors from Iraq and Afghanistan? Many of them have injured spinal cord injuries, injured brain tissue. Why not connect their brain directly to a laptop computer that would allow them to energize an exoskeleton to become like Iron Man? Maybe you saw the Olympics last year, not the Olympics, but the soccer games. And the World Soccer Games began with a man kicking a football. Now, that may not seem like much until you realize that that man was paralyzed. He was a quadriplegic. And yet at Duke University, they put a chip in his brain, connected the chip to a laptop and then to an exoskeleton, giving him the gift of mobility, that he can now walk. He can now interact, even though he is basically a vegetable trapped inside his own mind. And the Pentagon has recently given a $50 million contract just a few months ago to the person who can develop a memory chip for our wounded warriors who have problems with memory because of injuries sustained in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, it turns out that scientists have actually created such a memory chip for animals, and now we want to create a memory chip for humans as well, especially Alzheimer's patients and people suffering from brain injuries. We can already record memories now. This has been done in mice, and we will do it for primates and eventually for Alzheimer's patients. Just think about it, a brain pacemaker. So you push a button, and memories come flooding into the hippocampus of your brain, giving you your memory back again, or at least isolated memories. And so these are just some of the exciting developments being done in the mind, all because of physics. Because of physics, we can now look into the living brain and see thoughts literally ricocheting back and forth inside the living brain. So why not give the gift of knowledge to a loved one by getting your copy of The Future of the Mind? And once again, go to my website, find out where I'll be speaking. The website is mkaku.org, mkaku.org. And you can go to my Facebook site, that's Michio Kaku. We have over 2.7 million people that come to my website on Facebook. And go to my Twitter account, because on Twitter we have 500,000 people picking up the Twitter feeds that I give on Twitter. So these are just some of the ways that you can interact with me. But why not simply interact with me directly by calling the magic number 866-323-2129. Leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on national radio. Okay, well, let's move right ahead now to our listener phone calls. Let's take the first listener phone call.
I'm calling from Newburgh, Oregon, and my name is Merlin. I was thinking about what you said about dark matter. Maybe there's a dimension within our universe. Instead of being outside, the vibration's different, or my brother had an incident out at the farm, and he was sleeping in his car, and he woke up late at night there was a beautiful little house and some kids running around right up in his field. And the next morning, he went up and looked, and then it was gone again. So there must be a dimension within a dimension, and the dark matter may be just the vibrations of a different dimension.
Well, you actually make an idea that is being taken very seriously by physicists. In fact, there are physics papers published on precisely this idea. First of all, what is dark matter? Dark matter makes up most of the universe. Every high school textbook is wrong that says that the universe is mainly made out of atoms. The universe is mainly made out of dark matter, invisible matter, which surrounds the Milky Way galaxy, invisible matter, which we will one day detect in the laboratory, but we can see evidence of this in outer space by looking at satellite photographs of light that has gone beyond different galaxies. So dark matter exists. It's more plentiful than ordinary matter, but what is it? It is invisible. If you held it in your hand, it would literally go right through your fingers and go all the way down to China. It has gravity, but it has no interactions with ordinary matter whatsoever. In fact, there are perhaps a shelf full of Nobel Prizes waiting for the physicists who can detect dark matter in a laboratory and actually prove and understand its properties. Now, there's several theories of dark matter, both of them coming from what is called string theory, which is what I do for a living. One theory which is gaining a lot of traction, in fact, most people, I think, would believe this who are working in dark matter. Dark matter is a new form of matter consisting of particles, subatomic particles, which are invisible. The leading candidate is called the photino. It's a counterpart of the photon. It is invisible, but it has gravitational pull. And it is a higher vibration of the string. So the neutron, the proton, matter we see around us is the lowest vibration of a vibrating string. But the string has higher octaves. The next octave would be invisible, and we think that's dark matter. So that's the leading theory. You can go to any physics conference on the world and talk to people about the photino, and they would say, yes, that is the leading candidate for what dark matter is. However, there is another theory which is quite bizarre, which can also be seriously considered by the physics community. And this is that dark matter is ordinary matter vibrating in another dimension. In other words, take two sheets of paper, put them parallel to each other. The bottom sheet of paper is our universe. But there could be another universe, another dimension hovering just above our universe. Now, if there is a galaxy in this other sheet of paper, this other universe, it would be invisible to us. But it would have gravity. Gravity goes between these sheets of paper. And so what would it look like? First, it would be an invisible galaxy. But second of all, you would detect its gravitational pull because gravity can go between these sheets of paper. That is another theory of dark matter which cannot be dismissed. In fact, it was proposed by Professor Joseph Licken at Fermi Lab outside Chicago, who happens to be a colleague of mine. In fact, we used to publish papers together on string theory. And so dark matter could, in fact, believe it or not, dark matter could, in fact, be the presence of matter vibrating in another dimension. Now, believe it or not, this idea goes all the way back to the 1800s, going back to science fiction writers who have written about this possibility, including H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells wrote a novel called The Invisible Man. It's been made into a movie many times by Hollywood. But if you actually read the novel, rather than looking at the Hollywood versions of the novel, you find out that the Invisible Man became invisible because as he's hovering just above us in the fourth dimension. In other words, we live on a sheet of paper called the third dimension. We have length, width, and height. But there could be, according to H.G. Wells, another universe hovering just above us like a sheet of paper, and the Invisible Man is living in this other parallel universe. That's why he's invisible. Because light cannot go between universes. Light is basically trapped in each plane. And so the invisible man is hovering right above us, inches above us. He's hovering above us, but we cannot see him because he's invisible. But gravity does go between universes. And so is this idea plausible? And the answer is yes. It is being taken very seriously by physicists. However, the truth of the matter is we have to have testable, reproducible evidence of dark matter. Now, we can, quote, see, unquote, the presence of dark matter in outer space by looking at the bending of light due to dark matter. That's why we have maps of dark matter. Dark matter is not science fiction. We have maps of dark matter. In fact, the Hubble Space Telescope allows us to calculate the amount of bending of light as it goes around the galaxy. But is dark matter due to the presence of another dimension? String theory says there could be 11 dimensions. And who knows? Perhaps dark matter, which makes up more matter than our universe, is ordinary matter vibrating in a parallel universe. Well, who knows for sure. But you can find out more by getting a copy of my books, including Parallel Worlds, where I talk about this theory. Once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129, and have your thoughts heard on national radio. So, give us a call.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Hi, this is DV Kidd. My new book, Taking Politics Out of Solutions, is now available. Why is it nothing changes no matter who you vote for? My book covers the most critical issues eating this country alive, as well as the solutions that are already there that Congress and the agenda-driven media don't want you to know. From the disaster of our economy, why we will never have economic freedom until the Fed is abolished, trade, the meltdown underway called Obamacare, the truth about Social Security and Medicare, and the fraudulent ratification of the 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. A very huge issue that affects every American. The answers and solutions are in my book, All Americans Need to Read, because the worst is coming at us like a freight train. To order, go to www.newswithviews.com.
Do you or a loved one suffer migraine headaches? Listen to what scientist Kurt Hendricks has to say.
If you are one of the millions of people who get migraines, you need to know about MiGrelief. Hi, I'm Kurt Hendricks, the scientist who created MiGrelief, the patented dietary supplement that addresses nutritional deficiencies in adults and children with migraines. Thousands of physicians and pharmacists recommend MiGrelief.
Call 800-MIG-7354 or visit MIG911.com.
Hello, here I am, Roy Masters, 55 years on talk radio and still saving lives. Please continue helping the Foundation of Human Understanding by simply donating $19.95 per month. Paying it forward plan will continue saving lives into the years to come. I'm a pioneer in helping our troops to overcome the ravages of PTSD without drugs. Go to FHU.com and then click on the donation page. That's FHU.com.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
Hi, folks. GetTheTea.com is the place where the popular Life Change Tea calls home. But did you know Get the Tea is also where you can purchase GMO-free organic supplements? You can read about their potent power at GetTheTea.com. Also, they just added a YouTube channel called Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. Education about our health can be a life change. Maybe that's why our famous tea is called Life Change Tea. Learn about the trees for life. Our supplements have no fillers, no wheat, no rice, no garbage. And our tea is wow to the body. Make a conscious health change. Educate yourself on the most powerful essence of life, which is your health. You want more? Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Or visit our YouTube channel at Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. And don't forget our fabulous mild detox tea at getthetea.com.
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. We are live, and you can give us a call. The number to call is 866-323-2129. And once again, you'll get a recording. Leave your name, call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can be on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Okay, well, the lines are open, so give us a call, and let's move on to the next listener phone call.
Yes, my name is Alan, and I have a question about Einstein's finding of how light is the fastest unit in the universe, how there's nothing that goes at a higher velocity than light, or that we cannot go faster than the speed of light. And then I hear about these neutrinos and positrons and photons and whatever, bosons that do go faster than the speed of light. And it seems to be some type of paradox, and I don't understand that. Could you please explain why we hear of particles that do go faster than the speed of light, but then at the same time we're told that Einstein's verification of light cannot go quicker than that? Thank you.
That's right. Just a few years ago, there was an announcement coming from the Large Hadron Collider, the largest machine of science ever built outside Geneva, Switzerland. The machine is 27 miles in circumference. You could put the city of Geneva inside the machine. That's how big this machine is. And there was an announcement there by physicists saying that neutrinos fired from the machine traveled from Geneva to Italy faster than the speed of light. It made headlines because people were saying, oh my God, was Einstein wrong? Well, Einstein was not wrong, and it turns out the story was bogus because they made a mistake. It's very easy to make mistakes because the speed of light is quite fast. It's 186,282 miles per second. You can go 7 times around the Earth in 1 second if you travel on a light beam. So what was the problem? The problem was they had the atom smasher in Geneva. They had the detector in Italy. They fired the neutrinos right through a mountaintop because neutrinos will go right through mountaintops as if they weren't there at all. But then how do you measure the distance between Geneva and Italy? Well, obviously you use the GPS system, right? But you see, the GPS system was miscalibrated by these physicists. So these physicists made the announcement. It created headlines. Einstein was wrong, says these physicists. But these physicists said very carefully they have to redo the experiment many times. When they redid the experiment, they found, oops, gee, I think we miscalibrated the GPS system. Ironically enough, the GPS system uses Einstein's theory of relativity. So, in other words, they were in some sense using Einstein to disprove Einstein. Well, Einstein has the last laugh. That paper had to be retracted. It turns out that Einstein is still the cop on the block. It still is true that the speed of light is the fastest velocity that we can measure in the universe. Now, however, there is something called entanglement, which we'll talk about after taking a short break. Entanglement does go faster than the speed of light, but Einstein still has the last laugh. So let's take a short commercial break. And afterwards, we're going to talk about something that actually does go faster than the speed of light, but Einstein still has the last laugh. So once again, give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Give us a call and you can ask your question on national radio. This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This machine costing about $10 billion is not going to give us better color television. We're not going to have better internet reception. We're talking about a machine that'll take us right to the beginning of time itself. By slamming protons together at trillions of electron volts, we are creating a mini Big Bang on a microscopic scale. And we are privileged to witness this event in happening right before our eyes. We are in some sense recreating the process of creation itself.
Here's Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. And Science Fantastic, well, before the break, we had a caller who said that, well, every once in a while, someone announces that Einstein was wrong, that you can go faster than the speed of light. Well, the neutrino announcement a few years ago was incorrect. It has been retracted by the physicists there, who are now quite embarrassed by going up against Albert Einstein. However, there is something that does go faster than the speed of light, and this is called quantum entanglement, but Einstein still has the last laugh on this matter as well. It turns out that Einstein never really believed in the quantum theory, and in this sense he was wrong. The quantum theory is a theory of atomic physics. Your internet, laser beams, GPS, all of it is due to the quantum theory. And in the quantum theory, if you have an electron and two electrons and make them vibrate together, they vibrate together and then you can separate them. And they're still vibrating together even though they're connected by this invisible twine that connects these two vibrating electrons. If you then flip one electron, the other electron senses the fact that its twin has been flipped, and it senses this faster than the speed of light. So people said, aha, Einstein was wrong. Well, not so fast. It turns out that Einstein, technically speaking, was wrong. Quantum entanglement does go faster than the speed of light. And how do we know that? We measure it. You can actually do this experiment in the laboratory. Take two electrons, vibrate them together, separate them, and then if you make one vibration on one electron, the other electron senses it faster than the speed of light. But why does Einstein have the last laugh? It turns out that the information that travels faster than the speed of light is random information, useless information. You cannot send Morse code. You cannot send email. You cannot send information faster than the speed of light. And so physicists today no longer say nothing can go faster than light. That's what we used to say. We don't say that anymore. We simply say that no real information can travel faster than the speed of light. And that's why Einstein still has the last laugh. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
My name's Darrell. I'd like to ask the question, how close are we of breaking the DNA code of nature? I heard about 15 years ago we were within 20 years of breaking it. How close are we now? I would like to know that. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think what you're asking is if all life has DNA inside, when will we finally have this master code, this code of all life on the planet Earth? Well, first of all, because of the Human Genome Project, we've cracked the human DNA, and for just $500, you can have all the genes in your body sequenced. This is amazing. Something that was once considered to be like a moonshot only costs $500. In fact, it's been in the newspapers. You probably read the fact that the rock star Prince passed away, and already there are numerous people who are saying that they are the mother of his child, and therefore they get a crack at some of the $300 million that he amassed during his lifetime. Well, in the old days, it was very difficult to prove paternity. However, now it's actually quite simple because we have the blood of Prince during his autopsy, and the judge has ruled that, yes, we can now rule on paternity cases, scores of them, in fact, all these people claiming that they are either the progeny of Prince or were the mother of Prince's child. And so as far as humans are concerned, this is now just a fact of life. However, what we want is a tree of life of all life forms. That, of course, will take many, many decades. Already we have an encyclopedia of the DNA of most life forms that we have analyzed. That already exists. An encyclopedia of known life forms. However, every day we find that there are new life forms that we didn't consider before, and so we want a complete DNA of all life. That's going to be very difficult. For example, the Cancer Genome Project. Of course, we can sequence the DNA of one person. However, that one person could have many cancers of different types. And so the Cancer Genome Project is much more ambitious than the ordinary Human Genome Project. And so will we ever have a complete tree of life? And the answer to that is probably no, because we constantly find new life forms, new species on the planet Earth. And for every tissue, you can make it cancerous. And so the Cancer Genome Project is, in fact, even more elaborate than the ordinary Human Genome Project. But as far as life forms that we've analyzed, yes, we have sequenced them. Yes, we're now getting a dictionary and, in fact, an encyclopedia tracing the lineage of all these different life forms. And we're now applying that lineage to ancient archaic humans to figure out where the Neanderthal fits into this tree of life. And recently we found yet another form of life, the Denisovans, meaning that the human family tree is more complicated than we thought. We used to think it was just Homo sapiens. Then we found the Neanderthals in the last century. And now we find perhaps even more branches of humanity because we have their ancient DNA.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Spread the word. Now there is powerful nutritional support for migraine sufferers. It's estimated that 35 million people suffer with migraines. Are you or a family member one of them? Well, now there is MigRelief by Akeso Health Sciences. MigRelief is a safe and healthy, non-prescription dietary supplement recommended by neurologists, pharmacists, and pediatricians to address the nutritional deficiencies in both adults and children over 2 with migraines. Just take 2 capsules a day of MigRelief for 3 months and see the amazing difference it can make in your life, or get your money back. No questions asked. There's nothing to lose. Akeso Health Sciences MigRelief has been helping people just like you for 20 years. Try MigRelief and get your life back risk-free with just one call. Call 1-800-MIG-7354, 1-800-MIG-7354, or go to MIG911.com.
Having a place to go after school will make you a better student. Having an outlet to express yourself will make you a better artist. Having something to do together will make you a better family. At The Y, we're helping build better friends, listeners, writers, swimmers, scientists, and musicians, one chance at a time. Give the gift of opportunity. Donate to The Y at ymca.net/give. The Y, for a better us.
Hi, this is DV Kidd. I have some exciting news. My new book, Taking Politics Out of Solutions, is now hot off the press. We cannot solve the cancers eating away at our republic if we don't know how they got started. Do you know that not a penny of your federal income tax funds a single function of the federal government? How can that be, and where does it go? The answers and solutions are in my book. To order, go to www.newswithviews.com.
You wouldn't dare build a house without a blueprint, and neither should you invest without a plan. Hi, Sam Sorbo here. My good friends at Landmark Capital specialize in tailor-made portfolios called Your Financial Blueprint. Let Landmark Capital show you how to control your retirement and safeguard your money from government seizure, protect it from an upcoming recession, and maximize your financial growth in case of inflation. Landmark Capital can show you how to put physical metals, gold and silver, into your IRA or 401k and take physical possession today. Your 401k IRA is a ticking time bomb. The government's racked up our debt to $18 trillion, and there's currently $18.2 trillion in retirement. 12 different countries have already seized their citizens' assets like bank and retirement accounts, and it can happen here any day now, according to the Federal Reserve. Get the facts. Call 855-747-5947, 855-747-5947, or find them at landmarkgold.com. Call 855-747-5947 or visit landmarkgold.com.
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. The lines are open. It's open mic in this hour. So once again, the number to call is 866-323-2129. Okay, well, moving right along now, let's take the next listener phone call.
Hi, Professor. This is Franz from WILK, Nanticoke, Pennsylvania. My question to you is, I've been listening to you for a while, and I don't know if this question's ever been asked, but what science fiction writers, what science fiction comic books or movies have helped you in your striving to come up with string theory and other things? I would be amazed to see maybe Isaac Asimov or Ray Bradbury. Thank you for taking my question.
Okay, well, let me answer your question indirectly. Rather than talk about science fiction works that helped to inspire my work in string theory, let me talk about how science fiction inspired my work as a child. You see, string theory is pure mathematics. If you buy any of my textbooks for PhD students, they are required reading at many of the world's leading physics institutions, but they're just pure mathematics. From page 1 to page 500 is nothing but wall-to-wall equations. And so reading science fiction novels don't really help me to master all these equations. However, when I was a child, I devoured science fiction. In fact, when I was a child, I basically had two heroes. One was Albert Einstein, because I read about the fact that he was chasing after this theory of everything that he did not succeed in ever finding. So I said to myself, why not be part of that grand chase to find the theory of everything? But on Saturday mornings as a child, I used to watch Flash Gordon on television. They would have the old Buster Crabbe reruns, and I was hooked. I mean, wow, what's there not to love? Starships, aliens, ray guns, cities in the sky. In fact, for you Star Wars fans, you probably know that practically scene for scene, George Lucas has admitted stealing huge chunks of Flash Gordon that were then incorporated into the Star Wars series, beginning with the very first scene. The very first scene, you see the chapter rising into the heavens. That comes directly out of Flash Gordon. And in Flash Gordon, you also have scenes where you go to planets which are frozen, underseas kingdoms, cities in the sky, all of them in Flash Gordon, which were basically, quote-unquote, stolen by George Lucas in the Star Wars series. But as far as science fiction novels are concerned, the Asimov series, the Foundation series, had a tremendous impact on my work because it forces you to confront what happens not just 100 years in the future, but 50,000 years into the future. In other words, what will civilization look like when we become galactic? That's the basis of the Foundation series, and that's been sort of one of my guiding principles. Let's not look at science fiction 100 years into the future. Let's look 50,000 years into the future, when the things we find in Star Trek may become commonplace. Okay, well, let's take another short commercial break, and after the break, we're going to continue with Open Mic on Science Fantastic.
You're listening to Science Fantastic. You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. And let me remind you once again, go to my website. It's mkaku.org, mkaku.org. It gives you my tour schedule. And perhaps I'll be signing your copy of my latest paperback book, The Future of the Mind. Okay, well, moving right along now, let's take the next listener phone call.
Professor, do you think man will ever figure out anti-gravity?
Well, you ask a question that I get a lot because every time we see a science fiction movie, somewhere in that movie there is anti-gravity, starting with hoverboards. If you watch the Back to the Future series, there's Michael J. Fox whizzing along on a hoverboard. After that movie came out, Back to the Future, stores were deluged with calls asking to purchase hoverboards. Well, let me say right now, there are no hoverboards because we don't have anti-gravity. If you watch the latest Star Wars movie, once again, you have anti-gravity devices that don't use wheels. Instead of using wheels to navigate a desert terrain, you simply zip along using an anti-gravity device. Okay, so now we've talked about the science fiction. Let's talk about the science. First of all, is there anti-gravity? And the answer is probably no. It turns out that in nature, every particle has an antiparticle. The electron has the anti-electron. The proton has the antiproton. But when you take a look at light, it turns out that anti-light is light. Light is its own antiparticle. If you look at gravity, gravity consists of gravitons, and it turns out that the anti-graviton is the graviton. So in other words, anti-gravity is gravity. And so don't expect to find hoverboards or flying cars that use anti-gravity anytime soon. Now, what about magnetism? Yes, magnetism is a possibility by which we can one day perhaps have hoverboards, but it turns out that you have to have powerful magnets, much more powerful than anything we have at the present time. You need superconducting, room temperature magnets, and we don't have them yet. We haven't invented them yet. So that's why we can't even get Michael J. Fox's hoverboards made out of magnetism. Now, what about on a cosmological scale now? Then there is something called dark energy. Dark energy does have anti-gravitational properties. It pushes the galaxies apart. In other words, we have the Big Bang Theory, which says the universe is expanding. But if the universe is expanding, then what about gravity? It turns out there's an anti-gravity that is stronger than gravity at these large distances, which is pushing the galaxies apart, creating the expanding universe. So in that sense, there is an anti-gravity. But this anti-gravity in your room, for example, is very, very weak. It's only strong on a galactic scale between galaxies. It's enough to push galaxies apart, but in your room, it is so weak that you cannot suspend yourself on a hoverboard using anti-gravity. So in other words, negative energy, the energy of anti-gravity, is only on a cosmological scale. You can use it to give us the expanding universe, but you cannot use it to get a hoverboard. Now, what about our space program? Wouldn't it be nice to have anti-gravity so our astronauts won't atrophy with their muscles under weightlessness? There is a way to create anti-gravity for our astronauts, and that is to spin the spacecraft. In other words, if we go to Mars, it'll take 2 years of weightlessness for our astronauts. That's too long. Muscles will atrophy. All sorts of medical problems will arise if you have people weightless for 2 years at a time. But why not spin it? If you spin the spacecraft, then centrifugal force will push the astronauts against the floor, and they'll feel gravity. So why don't we do that? Well, there's a problem. A 4-letter word that begins with C called cost. It costs too much to spin our spacecraft. So in other words, to go to Mars, our astronauts are going to have to suffer under 2 years of weightlessness. Muscles will atrophy, bone will atrophy, calcium, phosphorus, valuable minerals will leach from the human body during that 2-year period of time. In the future, however, when space travel becomes cheaper, then we will spin the spacecraft, giving us artificial gravity. Now, you probably saw the movie 2001. Remember that movie, 2001? There was this great scene in that movie where our astronauts are going to Jupiter, and some of them are under suspended animation, but some of them are awake. And the ones who are awake run along a track on the space station, which is circular. And as they run, they don't fall down. They run 360 degrees, even upside down, but they don't fall. And why? Because the spacecraft is spinning. That, of course, is a technology which is possible, but expensive. But in the movies, Hollywood did it in that great scene in 2001. So how did Kubrick actually film that scene? He actually rotated the entire set. That's how he was able to get our astronauts running 360 degrees in a circle. Okay, well, unfortunately, we have run out of time for Science Fantastic. Once again, you can always give us a call at 866-323-2129 and have your thoughts heard on national radio. Once again, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Follow my work on my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org. And perhaps you can get on national radio with your comment or question about science. And so once again, the number to call is 866-323-2129. Join us every week when we discuss the cutting edge of science.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Little girl, stop. Look, I need to borrow your hoverboard. Where is he? There! He's on a hoverboard!